After suffering their first loss of the season, the Sooners look to bounce back in a road trip to Fort Worth to face TCU. Here's a quick breakdown of each team's current status, keys to victory, and final prediction for the game. Let's start with Oklahoma. Ugly. That pretty much describes the performance on Saturday in a nutshell. Now, I'll preface this by saying I don't believe Kansas State is a bad team. They had a bad outing against Tulane. And boy, could you say the same about the Sooners. Let's start with the offense, because at least there's some positives on that side of the ball. From a solely statistical perspective, the offensive numbers looked great. 550 total yards of offense. Eric Gray breaks the 100-yard mark once again, continuing to show how good he can be while used effectively. Dillon Gabriel accounts for nearly 400 total yards, 4 touchdowns, and once again doesn't turn the ball over. Braden Willis nets 2 receiving touchdowns. So what's the catch? Missed opportunities. While Gabriel put up otherworldly stats, some of his 13 incompletions came at the worst times possible, including missing Drake Stoops twice in key moments, one of which was a sure touchdown. I've seen a lot of flag thrown Gabriel's way, which I do think is unfair. He will continue to gel with this offense, but a couple of his misses were huge and could have turned the tide. The offense has also been uncharacteristically penalty prone, which has been disappointing to say the least. Again, some of it is growing pains that are a part of the speed offense this team runs, but how long can that be an excuse? At the end of the day, while the offense was far from perfect, the blame for this loss is felt infinitely more on the defensive end. If you had told me the Sooners would score 34 points, I would have assumed they emerged with the win. But in the words of Lee Corso,
fuck it.
Now there are a couple of facts of life that hold true. 1. If Deuce Vaughn rushes for over 100 yards, Kansas State is likely winning the football game. 2. If you're a quarterback at Kansas State and you're matched up against an Oklahoma defense, you are primed to have a Heisman caliber moment. And sure enough, both of those came to fruition. Let's start with quarterback play, because the game plan should have been clear from the jump. Adrian Martinez has been hesitant to throw, so force him to make those hard decisions and he'll likely throw it away. Only this time he didn't. He threw completions. He gashed the secondary through the air and on the feet to the tune of nearly 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, including 4 rushing touchdowns. Keep in mind, this OU defense has been stellar against the run all year. Many of us, including myself, thought this defense had truly turned the corner. Unfortunately, Saturday we learned this just isn't the case. Even going back to the basics, good tackling, which has been a pleasant improvement throughout the year so far, the tackling looked like last year's team. Players looked out of place, pursuit angles looked off, veterans who you expect to lead the defense played poorly. Nearly everything I've praised the Sooner defense for over the past 3 weeks did a complete 180. At the end of the day, Oklahoma allowed 509 total yards and, more disturbingly, 41 points, after surrendering a total of just 30 points over the first 3 games. Honestly, I was trying to find something positive to say about the defensive performance, but I don't think I will. I'll sum it up with this statement. This did not look like a Brent Venables defense, but at the end of the day it is. And in order for Oklahoma to be successful moving forward, performances like this cannot happen. The internet would like you to think that the sky is falling in Norman, but don't get carried away. Let's be honest with ourselves. When is the last time the Sooners have had an undefeated regular season? There is always at least one disappointing performance. And while this one stings a bit more considering the expectations that grew over the start of the year, there is still plenty of reason to believe that OU can bounce back and still have a successful 2022 campaign. Oklahoma will be on the road for the first time in Big 12 play facing TCU, and the Horned Frogs don't plan on making it an easy trip. Oklahoma wasn't the only Big 12 school that had coaching turnover, but the situation was a bit different in Fort Worth. After letting Gary Patterson go late last season, Sonny Dykes takes on the task of building TCU back up to a Big 12 contender. While the cupboard isn't bare, there's definitely work to be done. 7 starters return on both sides of the ball, and the Horned Frogs will be looking to rebound from a disappointing 5-7 season. Since TCU has already had their bye week and had a virtual bye against Tarleton, we basically only have 2 games worth of film to work with. And one of those games was against a Colorado team that sits as one of the few winless squads in the nation. That being said, the offense has been impressive so far, and it starts with a change at quarterback. Sooner fans will recognize Chandler Morris, the former backup Oklahoma quarterback who sat behind Spencer Rattler, but did record 2 rushing touchdowns, including the first score in the 2020 Big 12 title game. Unfortunately, he suffered an injury in TCU's first game of the season, and veteran quarterback Max Duggan took over. Judging by how well Duggan has performed, we shouldn't see a change this week even if Morris is healthy. Last Saturday against SMU, Duggan impressed, throwing for nearly 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. TCU fans will be familiar with the 4-year starter, but so will OU fans. Duggan wasn't spectacular early in his career against Oklahoma, but last year showed out to the tune of 346 yards and 4 touchdowns. He'll be hoping for a repeat performance this week. Running back Kendre Miller will be looking to build off a great performance against SMU, and the Horned Frogs will continue to spread the ball amongst their receiving corps, which returned 5 players that recorded over 100 receiving yards last year. The TCU offense has played well so far this season, putting up over 500 total yards and over 45 points per game, ranking near the top of the Big 12 and nationally. On offense, it will really come down to this. How will they perform against their biggest defensive test of the season thus far? Because let's face it, their competition hasn't been elite. Colorado has allowed 43 points per game, and SMU isn't exactly setting the world on fire either. However, against the SMU defense, which has been the best defense TCU has played against, the Horned Frogs had no problem moving the ball, and at moments looked unstoppable. The phrase defense wins championships is not lost on the Horned Frogs, and they've played decently through the season, giving up an average of 21 points per game. This is a monumental turnaround compared to the near 35 points per game they allowed last season, which made life miserable for the offense. Some of it may be credited to the new scheme. Since Gary Patterson is out of the picture, TCU has been running a 3-3-5, which allows for quick flexibility into both a 3-4 and 4-2-5, which can give the offense some unique looks. The defense is led by what I can only be described as a bunch of Hodges, building some muscle on that side of the ball. You got Navy transfer linebacker Johnny Hodges, junior linebacker Jamoy Hodge, and all Big 12 first-team performer cornerback Travius Hodges Tomlinson. In all seriousness, the defense is made up of a lot of upperclassmen that have played a big part of the defensive improvement we've seen so far this season. SMU was by far the most prolific offense they've played all year, and while they gave up more points in that game than they gave up in the previous 2 combined, the defense did what they had to do in order to secure a win, which is more than I can say about Oklahoma's defense last week. But they will need to continue to improve if they want to have a chance to stop this Sooner offense. The opening win against Colorado has aged terribly. Tarleton is Tarleton, so really that SMU game is what we can pull the most information from. And even that situation is awkward with Dykes being their former head coach. That likely played a role in the outcome, but at the end of the day, TCU won a game on the road, okay, 45 minutes down the road, but you know what I mean, and becomes the first team Oklahoma has faced this season coming off a win. Keys to victory. While this isn't the best Oklahoma offense we've ever seen, it might be one of the quickest. However, although speed can kill, when you fall fast and hard. If the Sooners go 3 and out, they do it fast. Defensive coordinator Joe Gillespie is going to need to pull everything out of his bag of tricks to slow the Sooners down. But if he can effectively utilize the 3-3-5 to negate OU's offense, TCU has a chance here. It's a home game for TCU, but let's be honest, Fort Worth is basically a hop and a skip from Norman. Not only will TCU fans need to pack and vastly outnumber Sooner fans at M&G Carter, but the Horned Frogs will need to fire that crowd up with some big plays early. Because if not, you can be guaranteed to hear Boomer Sooner raining down, even in Texas. TCU is going to have to outplay Oklahoma in all 3 phases of the game, including special teams, which features seniors at kicker, punter, and returner. They haven't had to rely on special teams to win a game this year so far, but football is a game of inches, and every single one will count against the Sooners. I was preaching from the pulpit last year that Eric Gray was not being used effectively, and thank goodness he is finally having a chance to show out this year. Oklahoma will need to put points on the board to win this matchup, and getting Gray involved early in the run game, gashing the TCU defense will be a perfect way to get on the right track. TCU has forced 2 turnovers in each of their last 2 games. Dylan Gabriel has yet to throw an interception this season, and Oklahoma has just a single turnover over 4 games. If the Sooners can keep the clean sheet alive, I expect them to get out of Fort Worth with a win. This is a direct message to the defense. Last week didn't happen. It can't happen. The bad tackling, the breakdowns, the mental errors. Get back to playing the type of defense you played the first 3 games of the season. If the Sooner D can get their minds right ahead of Saturday, then they should be able to hold fast against the Horned Frogs. Oklahoma has won 8 games in a row against TCU. 3 of those games have been decided by 1 possession. However, number 9 won't be. I'm not saying it will be a blowout from the jump, but while the first half may be close, I expect the Sooners to put the game out of reach by the 4th quarter. Oklahoma plays with a chip on their shoulder and wins this one 45-20. OU is headed to the SEC sooner rather than later. Check out this video on how they'll perform here, and as always, have a great day and see y'all at the next one.